Along the wide river plains of ancient Mesopotamia, the earliest cities left behind thousands of clay tablets, quiet records pressed by steady hands. These tablets describe the Sumerian gods with a tone so calm and so procedural that later generations struggled to understand them. Names like Enlil, Enki, Inanna, and the Seven Anunna appear not as figures in conflict, but as parts of a world organized through measurements, seasonal timing, and daily ritual. Yet centuries later, within the restricted rooms of the Vatican, these same names were reclassified as fallen angels, interpreted through a very different lens. This documentary follows the path of those misunderstandings. Moving through the archives of Eridu, Nippur, Uruk, and Lagash, it traces how administrative records became sources of speculation. The story unfolds slowly, in the same tone found in the tablets, quiet, steady, and grounded in the details carved before memory. The names written before scripture. The plains of southern Mesopotamia held a quiet landscape where rivers moved without urgency and early cities grew along their slow bends. Archaeologists working near Eridu uncovered layers of clay tablets dating as far back as 3200 BCE. These tablets describe a group known as the Anunna, written in firm wedges pressed into wet clay. The scribes who made these marks did not treat these beings as distant legends. Their writing resembles administrative reports, listing duties, titles, and domains with the same tone used for temple workers or canal supervisors. When Henry Rawlinson studied these tablets in the 19th century, he wrote, "The figures appear as officials within an organized system rather than spirits of myth." The Vatican's restricted manuscripts contain notes that interpret these same names through a different lens. A record from 1908, prepared by cleric Pietro Cavalli, lists several Sumerian names beside the Latin term spiritus lapsi, meaning fallen spirits. His handwriting is small and even, as though the subject required precision. Next to the name Enlil, he wrote qui separatus est, or the one set apart. Cavalli did not explain the designation. He treated it as an established classification, though it contrasted sharply with the tone of the Sumerian records. Enlil appears frequently in tablets from Nippur. One, catalogued as CBS 13862, includes a short passage stating, "Enlil arranged the winds as they should move." The line is calm and matter-of-fact. No mention of rebellion or judgment appears anywhere in the tablet. Instead, the text reads like a report from a bureaucratic office. When later scribes copied the passage, they reproduced it with little variation, suggesting that the description remained stable for centuries. Another Vatican manuscript, labeled Liber Caeli and dated around 172 CE, attempts to compare Eastern traditions with early Christian teachings. Its author, Marcus, wrote, "In the regions of the first rivers are accounts of those who came down and taught the kings. These may be among those who fell from the order of heaven." Marcus relied on second-hand reports from travelers, citing no tablet or inscription. Still, his phrasing influenced later scholars, who placed the Sumerian gods within categories created long after their culture had vanished. Excavations at Tel Abu Salabik revealed a group called the Igigi. A tablet from the site includes a line stating, "The Igigi watched the labors of the people and spoke of burden." The words are simple. The description seems to refer to their role as observers of natural cycles and temple functions. When Jesuit scholar Father Alexandro Riva studied the translation in the late 19th century, he noted the word watchers and wrote in the margin, "Possible connection to the watchers of Enoch." Riva's observation was cautious, yet later researchers expanded it into a firm association. This shift illustrated how a single interpretive note could reshape the understanding of an entire group. In Sumer, the Agigi appear in practical contexts. Administrative tablets from Lagash list offerings made to their stations. These stations were likely small shrines placed along canals or near city gates. The offerings included grain, dates, and small measures of oil, the same items given to other temple-linked entities. These records show no hint of exile or moral judgment. They reflect a structured religious system that integrated symbolic figures into daily city life. In 1922, Samuel Kramer translated a fragment from Uruk, describing Inanna's descent into the underworld. The text is damaged, yet one remaining line states, "She is of the Anunna, the doors open to her." Later writers, seeing a connection between descent and darkness, classified Inanna as a fallen figure. This interpretation diverged from the Sumerian view, where descent was part of a ritual cycle rather than a sign of punishment. Inanna's actions were described with procedural clarity, not moral commentary. The Vatican archives contain an index compiled in 1912 by Ernesto Bianchi. In it, he placed the Anunna under the category Angeli Lapsi. No justification appears in the entry. Bianchi's classification reflects an administrative need to sort pre-Christian beings into defined groups. His work demonstrates how institutional frameworks could override the cultural context of the original sources. In contrast, field notes from early excavators show the practical nature of Sumerian texts. In 1854, William Loftus wrote about a tablet found near Ur that listed canal inspections ordered by Enki. The tablet reads, "Enki measured the depths and assigned workers to each place. The tone is functional. Enki serves as a planner of water management. None of the lines treat him as a rebellious or fallen figure. His actions are described with the same neutrality used for city officials." Translation choices also shaped later interpretations. The Sumerian term Dingir can mean deity, presence, or elevated being. Early Christian scholars translated it as God or angel, categories that carried moral implications not present in the original context. A translation completed in 1783 equated Dingir Anunna with fallen host, because the beings were said to descend. In Sumerian writing, however, descend often meant entering a temple or stepping down from a ceremonial platform. The word described motion, not exile. Jean Bottero, writing in 1974, argued that the Sumerians did not divide spiritual and physical realms. Their beings participated in meals, assemblies, and festivals. A clay cylinder from Kish notes that the Anunna took seats in the hall on the second morning of the celebration. Bottero pointed out that such accounts contradict the idea of fallen spirits. The Sumerian texts show beings integrated into the social structure of the temple, not cast out from it. A 1641 Vatican document titled De Exiliis Spirituum sought to merge traditions from across the ancient world into a single narrative. Its author listed names from Sumer, Canaan, and Egypt together, attempting to frame them as fragments of a universal story of rebellion. This approach grouped unrelated traditions under one theme. Modern scholars note that the author worked from theological aims rather than archaeological evidence. In 1999, a dig at Shurupak found tablets recording food distributions. One entry lists meals allotted for the Anunna in the upper chamber. Archaeologists interpret the phrase as referring to ritual statues or symbolic placements within temple rooms. The tablet treats the Inanna as part of the temple inventory. The writing remains steady and unemotional, matching the tone of earlier records. Scribal schools in Sumer trained students to copy tablets with precision. A practice tablet from Nippur shows the name Enlil, written 9 times. Each version differs slightly in shape, reflecting a student learning to form the signs. The repetition shows the importance of accuracy. Scribes preserved the names exactly as they inherited them. Their work maintained continuity across centuries, emphasizing the stability of the tradition. When the Sumerian texts are compared with the Vatican classifications, the contrast becomes clear. The clay tablets present structured roles within early cities. The Vatican documents categorize these beings based on later theological interpretations. The distance between the two traditions widened over time, shaped by translation choices, institutional aims, and the desire to align ancient records with familiar ideas. The story remains preserved in both clay and parchment. Each source offers a different view of the same names, written centuries apart, the words carved before myth. The southern cities of early Sumer developed around open courtyards, low walls of mud brick, and temple platforms that rose a little higher than the surrounding homes. These temples were quiet places, built with narrow rooms that held tablets, offerings, and small objects of ritual use. Excavations at Eridu uncovered one such room with a collapsed ceiling and a layer of clay tablets broken into many pieces. When reassembled, several of them revealed short inscriptions written in steady lines. These inscriptions were not prayers or poetic hymns. They were records of how the divine order was arranged, written in a tone that resembled instructions rather than myth. A tablet dated around 3100 BCE, labeled ERI, 23 inches the museum catalogue, states, "The Enunna stood in presence at the house of the directions." Scholars interpret this as a reference to a ceremonial assembly, possibly linked to seasonal cycles. The wording remains plain and consistent. There is no narrative, no conflict, only the record of who stood where and what role they fulfilled. Similar texts found at Nippur follow the same tone. One fragment, NIP 44, lists the positions of several beings during a temple meeting. Enlil at the central place, Ninlil at the east place, the Seven Anunna at the left place. The precision suggests a structured tradition that the scribes were expected to preserve without alteration. In 1892, archaeologist Hormuzd Rassam uncovered a clay chest near the ruins of a Nippur temple archive. Inside were tablets that had been neatly arranged before a fire destroyed the building centuries earlier. Among them was a text describing the creation of ritual boundaries within the city. It reads, "The words were set down before the pillars. The order was made firm. The watchers recorded the limits." The reference to watchers has drawn attention due to its connection with later traditions. But in the Sumerian context, the term referred to officials responsible for measuring city spaces and marking ceremonial routes. Their role was practical, not supernatural. The Vatican's restricted manuscripts contain a Latin commentary from 1627, written by scholar Hieronymus Tellini. He reviewed several Sumerian inscriptions brought to Europe by merchants and translated by early linguists. In his commentary, Tellini wrote, "These names appear in the ancient scripts as those who stood before the order itself. If they stood before the order, then they remained outside of the true light. Such ones are of the fallen ranks." Tellini's conclusion was based on theological reasoning rather than textual evidence. He viewed any being outside the Christian hierarchy as fallen, regardless of the original cultural meaning. His classification influenced later archivists who continued to sort Sumerian beings under categories shaped by doctrine rather than archaeology. In Eridu's level the Sixth Temple, a group of tablets was found stacked on a low shelf that had survived the collapse of the roof. One of them, now known as ERI 61, states, "The house is the place of the words. Here the order is spoken, and here it returns." The phrase, "house of the words," appears in several tablets across multiple sites. Scholars believe it referred to the space where ceremonial decisions were made. The phrase suggests that the Sumerians viewed divine authority as something expressed through speech and recorded for continuity. This matches the calm, procedural tone found in tablets concerning offerings, festivals, and seasonal adjustments. A fragment from Lagash, catalogued as Lag 17, lists the duties assigned to the Enunna of the city's edge. It reads, "They note the times, they observe the rising of the days, they hold the measure of the fields." These descriptions resemble the roles of officials who monitored agricultural cycles. When modern scholars compare these duties with the Vatican's classification as fallen beings, the contrast becomes clear. The Sumerian inscriptions present beings integrated into the city's operation. The Vatican manuscripts categorize them within a moral framework that appeared long after these tablets were written. When Henry Rawlinson began studying Sumerian cuneiform in the mid-19th century, he copied several inscriptions into his notebooks. One entry reads, "These words speak of tasks, not tales." Rawlinson noted that early Sumerian writing rarely describes events in dramatic terms. Instead, it preserves structured lists, sequences, and assignments. The tone remains quiet and factual. In the context of divine beings, the inscriptions treat them as part of an organized system, not figures engaged in rebellion or cosmic conflict. A small tablet discovered at Kish in 1911 contains a short line that has been widely discussed. "The Anunna spoke, and the gates answered." The gates referred to physical doors within the temple complex, which were opened and closed by ritual attendants at specific times. The phrase is often interpreted metaphorically, yet the original context suggests a ceremonial action. The scribes recorded these actions without additional commentary. Their role was to note what happened, not to interpret its meaning. In the Vatican's Index of Pre-Abrahamic Entities, compiled in 1874, a clerk named Arturo Malvetti added several Sumerian names under the heading Ordo Lapsorum, or Order of the Fallen Ones. Beside the name Enki, he wrote, "A figure who dwells in the deep places, possibly among those cast down." This classification relied on a mistranslation of the Sumerian word abzu, which referred to a subterranean freshwater reservoir. Later, Christian scholars associated depth with infernal realms, leading to the belief that any being connected to the underground must belong to a fallen category. The original inscriptions, however, treat the abzu as a vital source of water, managed and measured with care. In 1978, archaeologist Joan Goodnick Westenholz studied a set of inscriptions from Uruk that describe early teaching practices. One line states, "The scribe teaches the words that were spoken first." Westenholz argued that these early texts shaped the way later civilizations understood divine order. The inscriptions were not myths, but framework-structured patterns used to organize cities, festivals, and social roles. The divine beings mentioned in the tablets functioned within this system. They were part of the world's structure, not exiles from it. A practice tablet found at Nippur shows a student writing a list of divine names with steady repetition. Each name appears 3 times. The exercise demonstrates the importance of accuracy. The scribes copied what they were taught, preserving each sign for future generations. Their work maintained continuity across centuries. Because of this preservation, the inscriptions show little variation, suggesting that the names and roles remain stable across long periods of time. When these inscriptions are placed alongside Vatican manuscripts, the differences become visible. The Sumerian texts describe beings who stood within the order of the world. The Vatican documents classify them based on theological categories that developed many centuries later. Each tradition created its own structure. The inscriptions from Sumer reveal a world shaped by measured roles, recorded with calm precision. The Vatican manuscripts reflect an effort to fit ancient names into a moral narrative. Both sets of records remain preserved in archives, one on fragile clay, the other on aging parchment. Each draws its meaning from the context in which it was created. Neither replaces the other. They stand as separate windows onto the same ancient names, written in different ages and shaped by different needs. The council beneath the first sky. The earliest descriptions of gatherings among the Anunna come from tablets buried beneath layers of silt in the old city of Nippur. These records, dated between 3000 and 2600 BCE, speak of a structured council that met within temple halls built from packed mud brick and timber. Archaeologists found these tablets in storage pits that once held administrative documents. The tone of these inscriptions is calm and procedural. They describe meetings, positions, and decisions in the same manner found in records of grain distribution or labor assignment. This suggests that the Sumerians viewed divine order as closely bound to the structure of their cities. A tablet marked "No Problem" 92 contains one of the earliest references to such a gathering. It reads, "They sat in the place of the high sky, Enlil at the center place, Enki at the deep place, the Seven Anunna at the open side." The place of the high sky was not a celestial realm, but a ceremonial chamber elevated above the main courtyard. Excavations revealed wide steps leading to this chamber, indicating that it served as a formal meeting area. The inscriptions do not include mythic language. They treat the gathering as an organized assembly with clear seating arrangements. Another text, labeled UR11, was discovered in during Leonard Woolley's excavations in the 1922. This tablet describes a moment when the council deliberated over the timing of the seasonal flood. It states, "The council spoke, the waters were set, the days were counted." Woolley noted that the writing did not show signs of later editing. This suggests that the Sumerians maintained a consistent record-keeping tradition across generations. Their council was not a symbolic idea, but a structured component of their worldview. In 1878, scholar Julius Oppert examined a fragmented cylinder from Lagash that appears to reference a council ruling. The line reads, "In the house of silence they heard the winds." Oppert interpreted house of silence as a term for a private chamber where decisions were made. Later excavations confirmed that several temples included enclosed rooms with thick walls designed to muffle sound. These rooms may have served as places for quiet deliberation. The inscriptions do not attribute dramatic events to these gatherings. Instead, they present the council as a body responsible for organizing time, space, and ritual. The Vatican's restricted archives include a document from 1704 titled De Concilio Caelestium, written by Father Matteo Rinaldi. Rinaldi reviewed translated Sumerian inscriptions and concluded, "Their council beneath the first sky suggests a company of angels who fell into lower realms." Rinaldi's interpretation relied on Christian cosmology. He equated any being not aligned with the highest realm as part of the fallen order. His conclusion does not match the Sumerian use of spatial metaphors. In Sumer, first sky referred to the visible sky above the city, a domain associated with weather, wind, and open space, not a moral hierarchy. A tablet found at Eridu, catalogued as Eri 74, provides additional detail about the council's function. It states, "They measured the corners, they fixed the lines of the year, they named the days of the star." These tasks correspond to astronomic observations made by early priests. The Sumerians used star charts to determine planting seasons and festival dates. The inscriptions show that the council's decisions linked celestial cycles with city life. Their work ensured that ritual and agriculture remained synchronized. In 1910, archaeologist Edgar Banks found a tablet in a collapsed temple room at Bismaya. This text, labeled Bis 08, describes a council discussion concerning the boundaries of a canal. It reads, "The council spoke, the workers took the measure, the canal was dug, Banks remarked that the tone resembled a civic record rather than a myth. The Anunna appear as figures who oversaw practical matters connected to water management. Their decisions shaped the infrastructure of early cities. The Vatican's classification of the Enunna as fallen spirits stems partly from a misunderstanding of such administrative inscriptions. A 1763 commentary by Abbot Lorenzo Mancini argued, "Those who rule the winds and waters in earthly halls are among those exiled from the true heights." Mancini assumed that any being involved in physical governance must belong to a lower spiritual category. His reasoning reflects theological concerns rather than an analysis of the tablets. The Sumerian inscriptions do not present the council as exiled. They portray it as central to maintaining the world's balance. A broken tablet discovered in Shuruppak, labelled SHU 19, includes a line that has drawn scholarly attention. "They spoke without haste. The hall listened." The line likely referred to an echo within the room, yet later writers interpreted it as a metaphor for obedience. The Sumerian context, however, suggests a literal architectural effect. The temples used thick walls and narrow doorways that created resonance. When someone spoke in the hall of assembly, the sound carried in a controlled way. The scribes, trained to note details, recorded this feature without embellishment. In 1966, anthropologist Denise Schmant-Besserat studied clay tokens believed to predate written cuneiform. She proposed that these tokens formed the basis for early administrative systems. When writing emerged, it continued the same practical focus. The inscriptions concerning the council reflect this continuity. They list who sat where, what decisions were made, and what actions followed. The tone remains steady and procedural, showing that divine order was integrated with civic planning. A small cylinder seal found at Kish depicts several figures seated in a row, facing a central figure who holds a staff. Scholars interpret this scene as a visual representation of the council. The seal does not include symbols of punishment or exile. Instead, it shows an organized meeting. When used to stamp wet clay, the seal would mark documents associated with decisions made during such assemblies. This reinforces the idea that the council operated within a recognized administrative framework. In 2003, excavators working at Telukaya uncovered a tiled floor beneath a collapsed temple. Nearby, they found a tablet fragment containing the phrase, "The council gathered on the floor of order." The phrase suggests that the physical space itself held significance. The floor may have been designed with a specific pattern to symbolize stability. The Sumerians often used geometric layouts to represent cosmic structure. Their inscriptions show that the council's meetings occurred within these symbolic spaces, linking architecture with authority. Comparing these inscriptions with Vatican manuscripts reveals a fundamental difference in worldview. The Sumerians saw the council as a group of beings who organized the world through measured actions. Their decisions governed time, weather, water, and ritual. The Vatican documents classify similar beings as part of a fallen hierarchy, shaped by later theological concerns. The two traditions intersect only in name, not in meaning. The clay tablets remain quiet records of a council that met under the open sky of early Mesopotamia. Their words show how the Sumerians arranged the world, not through mythic conflict, but through steady order expressed in lines carved before memory. The first descents, the earliest references to descent in Sumerian writing, appear in administrative and ritual tablets rather than mythic narratives. These texts, dated between 3000 and 2600 BCE, use the word to descend in a physical sense. Archaeologists studying tablets from Eridu, Uruk, and Nippur have noted that the term often describes the movement from a raised platform, a temple entrance, or a ceremonial staircase. The Sumerians built many of their sacred structures on elevated foundations. To enter these spaces, one had to descend steps into inner chambers where rituals were performed. This physical action later became misunderstood as a symbolic fall, rather than a shift from one level of a building to another. A fragment from Eridu, labeled Iri 19, states, Enki descended to the chamber of the deep waters. The chamber mentioned here was part of the temple complex, accessed by a short staircase leading into a lower room built to represent the Abzu, the freshwater reservoir beneath the earth. Excavators found remnants of plaster-lined basins in these chambers, supporting the idea that the space symbolized controlled water. The inscription does not imply punishment or exile. It describes movement into a designated ritual area. Another tablet, found in Nippur and catalogued as No Problem 31, records a ceremony linked to agricultural planning. It reads, "The Anunna descended to the house of the measure. This house was a storeroom where grain weights and boundary markers were kept." The term descend here refers to entering a lower storeroom built partly underground to maintain cool temperatures. The tablet describes a moment when priests and officials gathered inside the space to confirm seasonal measurements. The divine names appear alongside the names of human participants, indicating that the Sumerians viewed divine and civic roles as intertwined during ritual. In 1784, Vatican translators working on early Mesopotamian material classified descriptions of descent as evidence of fallen beings. A commentary by Father Ulrico Santi states, "Those who descend from the higher places must belong to the ranks cast down from the first order." Santi based his conclusion on Christian cosmology, assuming that downward movement held negative connotations. This interpretation does not fit the architectural reality of Sumerian temples, which required frequent movement between elevated platforms and recessed rooms. The Sumerian word for descent held no moral implication. It simply marked physical direction. A cylinder from Uruk, dated to approximately 2900 BCE, depicts a figure walking down a stairway leading into a hall with a patterned floor. Scholars believe the scene illustrates a ritual entry. The figure is followed by attendants carrying baskets of offerings. The inscription beside the image states, "She descends to the inner court." The inner court was a restricted room reserved for certain ceremonies. The act of descent signified transition into a more sacred environment, similar to entering a sanctuary today. The meaning was functional, not symbolic of rebellion or decline. A tablet uncovered at Lagash in 1927, designated LAG-06, includes a list of preparations for a festival honoring Enlil. One line reads, "The one who carries the vessel descends before dawn." Archaeologists found that the temple included a series of stairways leading into narrow corridors. The descent referred to the path taken by temple servants as they moved from the public areas to restricted inner spaces. The Sumerians recorded these movements precisely to ensure correct procedure. The inscriptions show that descent was part of the daily rhythm of temple life. In 1964, archaeologist Donald Hansen studied architectural remains at Al-Ubaid and identified several multi-level temple structures. He noted that many ceremonial areas were recessed, requiring visitors to descend into them. Hansen proposed that the Sumerians used these lower spaces to represent the hidden or interior aspects of the world. His analysis aligns with the inscriptions that used descent to signify entry into deeper layers of the temple complex. These spaces were not associated with shame or punishment. They represented closeness to foundational elements like water, earth, and silence. A small tablet found in Shurupak, labeled Shu 05, contains a quiet description of a ritual involving the Agigi. It states, "They descended to speak the words of timing." This phrase has been debated, yet the context of the tablet places the event in a storage chamber where early calendar markers were kept. The descent here likely referred to officials entering the room to update seasonal records. The calm tone of the inscription matches other administrative documents. It does not depict conflict or divine disobedience. The Vatican manuscripts interpret similar lines through a different framework. A document from 1692 titled Liber de Conlapsis includes a passage that equates any descent by divine beings with moral downfall. The author, Father Remigius Alfani, wrote, "Those who step down from the high dwelling place have abandoned the first grace." Alfani relied on the assumption that upward movement corresponded to spiritual purity, while downward movement indicated loss. His interpretation shaped later classifications that labeled the Sumerian gods as fallen angels, despite the absence of such ideas in the tablets themselves. Archaeological observations provide a clearer understanding of the Sumerian perspective. Excavators working at Telukere found a temple structure with a raised entrance leading to a sequence of descending corridors. These corridors guided participants toward a main chamber lit by small oil lamps. The spatial transition created a sense of entering deeper realms, yet the descent represented progression, not exile. The layout reflects Sumerian cosmology, where different layers of reality were accessed through architectural design rather than moral judgment. A cylinder seal from Kish shows a figure holding a staff while standing on a platform. Behind the figure, another individual is depicted stepping downward. The accompanying inscription reads, "He descends to bring the measure." This scene appears to represent a ceremony of measurement linked to irrigation. The descent refers to an official moving from a higher administrative platform to a lower working area. The presence of divine names in similar contexts suggests that the Sumerians viewed divine beings as participants in maintaining order through measured tasks. In 2008, excavations at Nippur revealed a staircase leading to a hidden room beneath the temple floor. The room contained several broken tablets. One of these, No Problem 88, includes the line, "They descended in the quiet hour." The phrase quiet hour likely referred to a time before dawn when certain rituals took place. The descent was a required step to enter the restricted chamber. This discovery confirmed the consistent Sumerian use of descent to describe movement into sacred spaces, not spiritual punishment. Comparing these inscriptions with Vatican classifications shows how a simple architectural term became transformed into a moral category. The Sumerian texts used descent to describe entry, transition, and access. The Vatican documents use the same idea to support a narrative of rebellion. The two interpretations developed in separate contexts and reflect different worldviews. The clay tablets remain steady in their meaning. They show a world where descent marked the beginning of ritual, the opening of ceremony, and the movement toward knowledge kept in lower halls. These early descents shaped the rhythm of temple life, long before later traditions redefined the word. The Watchers of the River Plains. The earliest mentions of the Igigi appear in tablets recovered from the cities of Kish, Nippur, and Sippar. These texts describe them in a steady, understated tone, presenting them as observers who monitored the rhythms of water, weather, and seasonal change. Archaeologists who worked on the 1894 Sippar excavation noted that the tablets referring to the Igigi were kept alongside administrative records, not mythological texts. This placement suggests that the Sumerians regarded the Igigi as part of the world's structure, connected to tasks that supported daily life along the river plains. A tablet, labeled Sip 12, contains a short line. The Igigi watched the rising of the river. The writing is clear and uninterrupted. Scholars believe the line refers to the seasonal swelling of the Euphrates. In Sumer, the timing of the flood shaped agriculture, travel, and temple activity. Observers were needed to record these changes. The tablet does not portray the Igigi as supernatural judges or rebellious figures. It simply notes their function as watchers, responsible for noting events that would influence the city's schedule. At Nippur, a tablet catalogued as no problem, 46 expands on their duties. It states, "They kept the record of the winds. They marked the days when the rains came." The calm structure of the lines resembles meteorological notes rather than a spiritual narrative. The Sumerians had early systems for tracking weather patterns using basic markers and recorded observations. The role of the Igigi in these inscriptions aligns with that system. Their work supported the decisions of priests and administrators who organized planting and harvesting. In 1875, scholar Edward Hinks examined a fragment from Lagash that mentioned the Igigi in connection with construction. The fragment, LAG 31, reads, "They observed the height of the walls." Hinks proposed that the Igigi may have been associated with measuring or verifying building progress. Later, excavations revealed alignment markers on several temple structures, suggesting a formal checking process. The inscriptions do not clarify whether the Igigi were imagined as divine presences or symbols of an institutional role, but they show that their purpose centered on observation and accuracy. The Vatican manuscripts interpret the Igigi differently. A document from 1689 titled De Vigilibus Caeli lists the Igigi under the category of fallen watchers. In the margin, a cleric named Antonius Varenti wrote, "Their watching is a sign of their separation from the true light." Varenti's conclusion is based on the Book of Enoch's depiction of watchers who descended and became corrupt. His reasoning reflects a later framework imposed on older material. The Sumerian inscriptions do not include any moral warnings. They treat the Igigi as stable elements of a measured world. Archaeologists working at Tel Abu Salabik found a school tablet from around 2600 BCE that included practice lines written by a student. Among them is the phrase, "The Igigi counted the hours." Counting hours required early timekeeping tools such as water clocks or shadow markers. These devices were used in temple settings, and the presence of the Igigi in the text suggests that the Sumerians linked these watchers to the process of marking time. Nothing in the tablet hints at rebellion. The phrase fits the pattern of procedural tasks recorded elsewhere. A broken tablet discovered in Ur, catalogued as UR58, contains a quiet description of the Igigi in relation to star movements. It reads, "They watched the star that rises early." Scholars believe the line refers to Venus, a planet observed closely in Mesopotamia due to its predictable cycle. The watchers likely symbolized the careful attention needed to track celestial patterns used for calendar corrections. The steady tone of the text matches administrative astronomy notes found throughout the region. In 1922, Leonard Woolley uncovered a small clay seal showing several figures standing on a raised platform facing the sky. The inscription reads, "The watchers stand in the high place." The platform depicted matches architectural remains found in ziggurat-style temples. These raised spaces may have served as observation points for recording celestial events. The seal reinforces the idea that the Igigi represented a function rather than a narrative character. They existed in the structure of the world as watchers of cycles. A later tablet from Nippur, dated around 2400 BCE, describes a council meeting involving the Enunna and mentions the Igigi in passing. The line states, "The Igigi observed from the outer place." The outer place referred to peripheral areas of the temple complex, where secondary observers stood. This suggests a distinction between decision-making and observation. The watchers recorded what they saw while the council made decisions based on those records. The Sumerians viewed both functions as essential to maintaining order. The Vatican's classification shifted these watchers into a category bound to ideas of downfall. A manuscript from 1714 titled De Caelesti Ruina contains a list equating the Igigi with those who looked down and fell. The scribe who prepared the document did not reference original tablets. His classification was based on thematic similarities to other traditions. This approach aligned with attempts to create universal narratives from diverse cultures. The method bypassed the context of the Sumerian texts, which do not present the watchers as part of a moral story. In 1956, archaeologist Thorkild Jacobsen analyzed a set of early Sumerian texts and noted that the Igigi appear primarily in functional lists. He wrote, "Their role is one of watching, marking, and observing. They belong to the order of tasks, not to the order of tales." Jacobsen's analysis emphasizes the calm, procedural nature of the inscriptions. His work remains one of the clearest interpretations of how the Sumerians understood the Igigi. A shard found at Shuruppak in 1999 contains a final example. The text reads, "They watched the quiet hours." The phrase likely refers to periods of early morning or late night, when priests perform checks on temple fires or water levels. The watchers appear as figures tied to the rhythm of the city. Their presence ensured that the systems supporting life on the river plains remained stable. When viewed through later interpretations, the Igigi became symbols of rebellion. When read from the tablets themselves, they remain watchers of cycles, calm observers woven into the structure of early Sumerian civilization. Their presence is recorded in steady lines of cuneiform, carved by scribes who noted the movement of rivers, winds, stars, and time without adding judgment. In their world, the watchers did not fall. They simply observed. The seven who stood apart, among the many names pressed into Sumerian clay, 7 appear with unusual consistency. These figures, often called the 7 Anunna, are mentioned in temple inventories, festival schedules, and ritual directives across cities like Nippur, Eridu, Uruk, Kish, and Lagash. Their presence in these records is steady but not dramatic. The inscriptions describe them with the same tone used for officials assigned to specific duties, yet their grouping suggests a distinct category. Archaeologists who studied early cuneiform noted that these 7 stood apart not because of rebellion or judgment, but because their roles required a level of oversight connected to the most sensitive functions of the temple system. A tablet from Nippur, catalogued as No Problem, 73, offers one of the earliest references. It reads, "The 7 stood in the second place. Enlil spoke. They listened." The writing is simple, without ornament or mythic tension. Scholars interpret second place as the area behind the central seat of authority in the assembly hall. The 7 appear as attendants or witnesses who ensured that decisions aligned with established ritual order. Their role was passive, yet significant, similar to officials who verify proceedings without participating directly in the deliberations. A fragment from Eridu, labeled Eri 42, adds another detail. It states, "The 7 measured the days of quiet." This line has drawn scholarly attention because the phrase "days of quiet" appears in early priestly calendars referring to intervals between major festivals. These intervals required careful observation of weather conditions and star positions. The inscription suggests that the 7 symbolize the accuracy needed for maintaining the timing of rituals. Their presence in the text reflects a structural function rather than a mythic identity. In 1911, archaeologist Stephen Langdon published a set of translated tablets from Kish. One of them, KI-08, includes a line, "The 7 stood beside the gate of the morning." Langdon believed the phrase referred to a temple entrance used for dawn ceremonies. Excavations later confirmed that several temples had designated eastern gates for observing sunrise alignments. The seven, in this context, appear associated with verification and transition figures, positioned at thresholds where timing mattered. The Vatican archives preserve a commentary from 1662 titled De Septem Separatis. The author, Father Giulio Amadi, identified the Seven Anunna as the seven foremost among the fallen hosts. Amadi based his conclusion on the number rather than the content of the Sumerian texts. In Christian tradition, groups of seven often appear in discussions of angels and judgments. Amadi assumed a similar structure existed in Sumer. His classification reflects an effort to harmonize unrelated traditions, not an analysis of original inscriptions. The Sumerian texts themselves do not mention exile or moral separation. They present the seven as part of the temple's operational framework. A tablet unearthed at Lagash in 1924, catalogued as Lag 22, states, "They guarded the place where decisions were sealed." The place of seals was a small room where officials pressed cylinder seals into wet clay to finalize records. The seven appear in this context as symbolic overseers of accuracy. Their inclusion underscores the importance of correctness in administrative practices. In early urban societies, errors in documentation could cause disputes over land, water, or trade. The seven provided a symbolic assurance that the process remained intact. A cylinder seal found in shows seven small star-like symbols arranged behind a figure seated on a chair. When Leonard Woolley discovered the seal's impression on a tablet, he noted that the star symbols likely represented the seven due to their arrangement. The accompanying inscription reads, "They stood behind him in the order of the sky." The phrase "order of the sky" referred to astronomical alignment rather than a celestial hierarchy. The Sumerians used star patterns to set the calendar, and the seven may have signified the fixed stars used for orientation. Their symbolic position behind the central figure reinforced the idea of support and verification. In 1973, scholar Age Westenholz examined a group of tablets from Uruk linked to early legal traditions. One line from Shu 28 reads, "The seven heard the words of measure." Westenholz observed that references to the seven often appear in contexts involving measurement, timing, and verification. This strength of association suggests that the seven were not mythic antagonists, but markers of precision within the system of divine order. The Sumerians placed great importance on accurate record-keeping, and these figures embodied that requirement. The Vatican's interpretation diverged sharply. A manuscript from 1751 titled Caeli Fracti lists the Seven Anunna as archons of the fall, a classification based on the belief that any group of seven with elevated status must relate to a cosmological rupture. The author, Basilio Montaldi, did not reference Sumerian tablets. His interpretation emerged from theological reasoning rather than archaeological study. This reassignment transformed the seven from figures of order into figures of suspicion, shaping later narratives that interpreted their presence as evidence of ancient rebellion. Yet the archaeological record remains consistent. A small practice tablet from Nippur, likely used by a trainee scribe around 2500 BCE, includes the line, "The seven stand apart." The phrase may reflect their administrative role, marking them as distinct within the hierarchy of temple tasks. It does not indicate exclusion or exile. Instead, it reflects functional separation, similar to officials who handle restricted duties. The tablet includes no further commentary, suggesting that the concept of standing apart was self-explanatory within the culture. In 2006, excavators at Tel Ukiah uncovered a floor mosaic beneath a collapsed temple room. The pattern included 7 repeated symbols embedded in a circular arrangement. A broken tablet nearby, labeled UQ17, contains the line, The seven encircled the pattern of the year. The proximity of the mosaic and the inscription suggests that the seven symbolized the seven major points of the early Sumerian agricultural cycle. Their presence reinforced the idea that the stability of the year depended on careful observation and division. This matches other inscriptions showing the seven linked to measurement, marking, and accuracy. They stood apart not as rebels, but as figures whose purpose required precision. Their roles connected to the basic rhythms of early life, the movement of the stars, the progress of seasons, the sealing of agreements, and the transitions of ritual. Later, reinterpretations shaped them into symbols of division. The tablets record something else, a calm presence woven into early structures, dependable and steady. Their names appear in the same lists as weights, measures, and seasonal records. They belonged to the order that shaped the first cities. Their separation was functional, not moral. The seven who stood apart remain preserved in the clay, not as warnings, but as markers of the structured world that once rose along the rivers of the southern plains, the deep hall of Enki. The earliest tablets describing Enki's domain place him within the Abzu, a word that referred to the deep fresh water beneath the earth. The Abzu was not imagined as a place of punishment or exile. It was the source of wells, canals, and springs. In Sumerian cities along the southern plains, Eridu, Lagash, and Shuruppak builders shaped their temples to reflect this world below the ground. Excavations show that many temples dedicated to Enki contained lower chambers reached by narrow stairways. These rooms were cool, quiet, and often built with plastered basins. The earliest inscription mentioning Enki in this setting, discovered in Eridu and catalogued as Eri 07, reads, "Enki went down to the deep hall and measured the waters." The line is simple, factual, and without symbolic judgment. It describes movement into a functional space where water was collected, stored, and purified. Archaeologist Fuad Safar excavated the Eridu temple complex in the 1940 seconds. His field notes describe a set of descending corridors leading into a chamber with a plastered basin shaped to hold water. Safar believed these chambers reflected the idea of controlled water, the basis of early irrigation. Several tablets found nearby listed measurements of water flow, storage capacities, and festival rituals connected to purification. In each, Enki appears not as a banished figure, but as a planner who oversees the deep spaces of the city. His presence in these texts aligns with the Sumerian understanding of fresh water as the foundation of life. A tablet uncovered at Nippur in 1903, labeled "No Problem" 12, states, "He descended into the deep place to set the lines of the earth." The lines of the earth referred to boundaries used in surveying fields. Sumerian surveyors relied on a combination of star charts and water levels to determine straight lines. The presence of water in the deep hall symbolized stability. Later, translators misread the phrase as cosmological or mythic, but the context of the tablet found with administrative field records indicates a practical meaning. Enki appears as the figure assigned to oversee activities connected to land and water management. A small fragment from Uruk, designated URU 19, includes a calm description of Enki performing a ritual. He washed his hands in the deep and spoke the words for the day. Scholars believe this line refers to a purification ritual performed before major decisions. The scribes who wrote these lines did not use moral language. Their tone is consistent with other ritual instructions. The deep hall served as a ceremonial starting point, similar to the way later cultures used thresholds or altars. The Vatican manuscripts reinterpreted this domain differently. A document from 1673, titled De Profundis Origine, categorizes Enki as one who dwells beneath, and therefore among the fallen hosts. The author, Father Lorenzo de Vico, equated physical depth with moral descent. His reasoning stemmed from Christian theology, where downward movement and subterranean spaces symbolized distance from divine light. De Vico did not reference the architectural meaning of the Abzu or the way Sumerians used lower chambers in temple design. His classification transformed Enki from a figure of order into a figure associated with exile. In 1968, archaeologist Robert Adams studied the remains of several Sumerian temples and identified a common pattern: elevated platforms paired with recessed chambers. These architectural features appeared across early Mesopotamia. Adams noted the lower rooms served functional and symbolic purposes linked to water regulation, purification, and administrative storage. His analysis matches the inscriptions that describe Enki's movement into these spaces. The descent was neither dramatic nor spiritual. It marked a transition from public areas into controlled chambers where measurements and rituals took place. A tablet from Lagash, catalogued as Lag 12, records a festival that began in the deep hall. It reads, "They brought the vessels to the lower chamber. Enki set the measure of the offerings." The offerings listed include barley, dates, and oil. These items were recorded in careful amounts. The use of the deep hall for such preparations suggests a connection between Enki and the calibration of resources. Temples often stored surplus grain or ritual vessels in cooler lower rooms. Enki's presence in these lists reinforces his association with order rather than moral ambiguity. Another text discovered at Shurapak in 2001, labeled SHU 33, describes a moment involving multiple figures. The seven entered the deep place with him. They carried the lions of water. Scholars believe the lions of water refer to early canal diagrams drawn on clay boards. The presence of the seven alongside Enki suggests cooperation rather than hierarchy. Their movement into the deep hall reflects a shared responsibility for maintaining water systems. The tone of the inscription remains steady and procedural. The Vatican's reinterpretation of Enki as a fallen figure influenced later Western writings. A 1701 manuscript titled Catalogus Spirituum Antiquorum includes Enki among the deceivers who dwell beneath the world. The author, Antoninus Balori, did not examine Sumerian tablets. His classification was based on the assumption that ancient deities associated with depth must represent corruption. This reasoning diverged sharply from Sumerian cosmology, where the deep waters symbolized potential, renewal, and order. Archaeological evidence continues to clarify the original meaning. In 1994, excavators at Telukaya uncovered a lower chamber beneath a temple floor. The room contained fragments of tablets placed near a plastered basin. One of them, UQ04, includes a line stating, "He made the waters still." The phrase appears in other texts linked to Enki. Scholars believe it describes the practice of letting water settle before use, a step necessary for ritual purity or measurement. The presence of this line in a practical context underscores Enki's role as a stabilizing figure. A small cylinder seal found in Eridu depicts a figure standing near a curved basin. The inscription reads, "Enki at the deep place." The seal likely served as an administrative stamp for documents connected to water allocation. Its imagery aligns with the functional interpretation of the deep hall. The seal does not show Enki in a dramatic pose or surrounded by symbols of conflict. Instead, the design focuses on his association with water. In 2007, scholars examined a damaged tablet from Nippur that contains an unusual line. "The deep hall speaks with quiet." The phrase may refer to the echo of water against plaster walls. The deep hall's acoustic properties likely contributed to its role in ritual. Echoes often signaled that the space was properly constructed. The Sumerians recorded such observations in calm detail. Their writing reflects an approach focused on the properties of the world, not moral narratives. Comparing these inscriptions with Vatican classifications reveals contrasting frameworks. The Sumerian texts describe Enki in rooms built for measurement, purification, and water management. The Vatican documents interpret these same depths as symbols of exile. Each tradition responded to different concerns. The clay tablets show a world organized through practical needs. The later manuscripts reflect theological assumptions projected onto earlier material. The deep hall of Enki remains present in both archaeology and text as a space of quiet order. Its stairways led not to punishment, but to the chambers where early cities shaped their understanding of the world's structure, the tablets of wind and time. The earliest inscriptions describing Enlil's responsibilities place him at the center of the ordered world. His name appears on tablets from Nippur, Kish, and Shurapak, always linked to the management of wind, seasonal movement, and the rhythm of time. These texts present him not as a ruler separated from creation, but as an official whose tasks shaped the environment on which early cities depended. Archaeologists working in the late 19th and early 20th centuries noted that references to Enlil often appeared alongside measurements, calendars, and lists of ritual timings. The tone of these inscriptions is steady and descriptive, matching the Sumerian tendency to record essential functions rather than moral narratives. A tablet discovered in Nippur in 1883, catalogued as No Problem 04, includes one of the clearest lines. Enlil set the winds in their courses. The cuneiform wedges are sharp and evenly spaced, suggesting that the scribe worked with great care. Scholars interpret this line as referring to seasonal wind patterns that affected agriculture and trade. Sumerian farmers depended on predictable winds for drying crops, moving boats, and signaling shifts in climate. The tablet describes this process in plain terms. Enlil appears as the figure responsible for assigning these movements, similar to an official who oversees the city's schedule. Another inscription, found in and labelled UR21, states, "He counted the days of the long season." This phrase refers to the period between harvest and planting, when agricultural decisions were made based on celestial observations. Sumerian priests used star charts to track the passage of time. Enlil's presence in these records suggests that he symbolized the authority of the calendar. The lines do not imply mystical power or dramatic control. They reflect a stable relationship between authority and timekeeping. In 1926, Leonard Woolley uncovered a fragment from Kish that lists the responsibilities assigned to various figures during a ritual cycle. One section reads, "Enlil placed the measure for the morning. Enki placed the measure for the deep. The seven held the line of the year." Woolley noted the precision of these assignments. The roles reflect a structured division of labor within the Sumerian worldview. Enlil oversaw the temporal aspect, while others governed spatial or elemental domains. Each figure contributed to the functioning of the early city in a complementary way. The Vatican's manuscripts offer a different interpretation. A document from 1698 titled De Ordinibus Caeli labels Enlil as the one who challenged the highest wind, associating his involvement with wind patterns as evidence of rebellion. The author, Father Adrianus Conti, interpreted wind as a symbol of divine communication. In his view, any figure who controlled it must have attempted to usurp higher authority. Conti's reasoning reflects theological symbolism rather than analysis of the original tablets. The Sumerian inscriptions do not present Enlil as oppositional. They frame him within the structure of natural cycles. In 1958, scholar Thorkild Jacobson translated a series of tablets from Nippur that described an early system of timekeeping. One of the lines from No Problem 67 reads, "He divided the day with light and dark." Jacobson argued that the phrase referred to the Sumerian practice of marking time with 2 main divisions rather than 12. The division reflected agricultural needs rather than cosmological doctrine. Enlil's connection to this system emphasizes his role in maintaining the regularity of daily activities. A small tablet, discovered in Uruk in 2004, catalogued as Shu 12, includes a calm description of Enlil's participation in a planning meeting. It reads, "He spoke the words for the year. The council listened." The words for the year referred to the decisions that set the dates for festivals, taxation schedules, and canal work. These decisions required accurate observations of seasonal patterns. The inclusion of Enlil's name suggests that he represented the authority that stabilized these cycles. The tablet shows no sign of conflict or moral tension. It reads like a formal administrative record. Another significant find came from Eridu in 1997. Archaeologists unearthed a tablet, Eri 55, describing the moment when the winds shifted before the planting season. The line states, "Enlil noted the change and marked the first day." This description matches weather patterns typical of the region, where winds provided clues for farmers preparing the fields. The tablet's tone is matter-of-fact. It suggests that Enlil's presence in the record symbolized the human act of observation, formalized through ritual. The Vatican's reinterpretation of these roles appears in a manuscript from 1734 titled Ventorum Exilium. The author classified Enlil among those whose breath stirred the air in defiance. This interpretation rested on the assumption that wind held symbolic meaning related to spiritual authority. The manuscript reflects an effort to merge older traditions with theological concepts of hierarchy and rebellion. Such reinterpretations reshaped the image of Enlil into a figure aligned with fallen beings, despite the calm nature of the original Sumerian texts. Archaeologists studying early Mesopotamian calendars have noted the importance of celestial patterns in shaping daily life. A tablet from Kish, labelled KI-15, includes the phrase, "He watched the star of nightfall." Scholars believe the line refers to the observation of a star used to signal the beginning of certain rituals. Enlil's appearance in this context highlights his connection to the temporal structure of the city. The Sumerians emphasized cycles rather than stories. They understood time as a sequence of predictable movements measured with careful attention. A unique discovery in 2011 at Tel Ukiah revealed a small circular clay object with etched divisions. Nearby, archaeologists found a tablet that reads, "The circle of days is his." The object may have been an early device for tracking seasonal intervals. Its association with Enlil reinforces his role in structuring time. The Sumerian approach remained practical, grounded in observation and necessity. Their writing reflects this perspective. The inscriptions show that Enlil's domain involved steady oversight. He set winds, marked days, observed stars, and provided the framework through which early cities understood the passage of time. The Vatican's later reclassification transformed these tasks into symbols of cosmic ambition or conflict. In contrast, the Sumerian tablets treat them as essential components of order. The tablets of wind and time continue to reveal this calm structure. They show a world where rhythm mattered more than narrative, and where the movements of wind and season were recorded in lines carved by scribes who understood their value. The hidden measurements. The Sumerians used a word that appears with quiet regularity across their oldest tablets: me. The term does not translate cleanly into a modern concept. Scholars describe it as patterns, ordinances, or foundations, yet none of these fully capture its meaning. In early inscriptions, the me appear as measured qualities that sustain civilization, ritual order, craftsmanship, writing, kingship, weaving, music, and dozens of other structured abilities. The tablets present them not as secrets or forbidden teachings, but as the basic measurements through which the earliest cities functioned. The tone of the inscriptions is steady. The me belong to the fabric of the world, recorded in administrative lists, festival inventories, and ritual instructions. A tablet recovered from Eridu in 1891, catalogued as Eri 29, contains one of the earliest known references. It reads, "Enki held the me of the house. He placed them where the words were spoken." The house referred to the temple, and where the words were spoken meant the central chamber used for declarations and ritual decisions. The line suggests that the me was stored, enacted, or symbolically anchored within the temple structure. Archaeologists found no objects labeled as me, yet the inscriptions treat them as concrete, functional elements. A fragment from Uruk, labeled Ura 33, lists several me in simple succession. The surviving lines include the measure of the crafts, the measure of the harvest, and the measure of the music. Each phrase presents the me as a standardized pattern rather than a mystical force. The Sumerians built their cities on predictable rhythms, water flow, crop cycles, and skilled labor. The me represented the consistent forms needed to maintain these rhythms. Nothing in the text suggests secrecy. The list resembles instructions or inventory rather than a hidden doctrine. In 1923, archaeologist Julius Jordan uncovered a group of tablets inside a collapsed room at Uruk's Inanna district. One tablet, URU 44, contains the line, "He counted the me before the festival." The phrase suggests a routine review of rituals before a major celebration. Early temples followed strict schedules. Each ritual required specific objects, actions, and chants. The counting of the me likely ensured that these requirements were complete. The inscription's tone remains procedural, matching other administrative records. The Vatican's interpretation of the me diverged sharply from these early descriptions. A 1678 manuscript titled De Sapientia Occulta labels the me as forbidden measures held by the fallen ones. The author, Father Alberto Anselmi, wrote, "Those who keep the patterns of power hidden from men belong to the line of the exiled." His interpretation was shaped by theological views associating secret knowledge with rebellion. Anselmi assumed the Sumerians described the me as concealed truths. He did not reference the many tablets showing the me as routine components of civic life. A small but important fragment discovered at Nippur in 1961, catalogued as No Problem 59, lists several me connected to writing and record keeping. It reads, "The me of the tablet, the me of the stylus, the me of the scribe." The phrasing suggests that even writing tools carried standardized qualities. Scribes trained with consistent methods to ensure continuity across generations. The tablet does not treat these me as tools of spiritual influence. Instead, they represent the stability of the scribal tradition. Another inscription, found at Lagash in 1919 and labeled LAG 34, describes the me in relation to leadership. It states, "The me of the city was placed in his hand." Scholars interpret this phrase as a reference to the appointment of a ruler. Leadership in Sumer was framed within a set of established forms, ritual obligations, administrative duties, and patterns of justice. The me embodied these expectations. Their presence in the text indicates structure, not secrecy. A tablet from Shurupak, Shu 52, includes an unusual line. "The me stood before the hall in silence." The phrase may refer to objects used in ritual displays. Clay models, tools, or symbolic items could be arranged before festivals or ceremonies. The inscription shows that the mi were treated as formal elements displayed in specific locations. Later commentators misinterpreted this silence as evidence of hidden or forbidden teaching. The context of the tablet, however, suggests a simple ritual arrangement. In 1972, scholar Miguel Civil analyzed several tablets from Nippur that listed dozens of mi. He noted that the lists included mundane items like the mi of weaving, the mi of pottery, and the mi of the oven. Civil concluded that the mi represented the structured forms of human activity. The Sumerians did not separate the sacred from the practical. Their worldview linked cosmic order and daily life through consistent patterns. The mi embodied this worldview, providing a framework for both ritual and craft. A small discovery made in 2009 at Telukere shed further light on this idea. Archaeologists found a fragment of a storage tablet containing measurements for clay mixing. Alongside listed quantities appears the line, the mi of the shaping. This suggests that even craft techniques were considered part of the world's underlying structure. The inscription does not elevate the mi to mystical status. It embeds them in the logic of correct technique. The Vatican's reinterpretation continued into later centuries. A document from 1721, titled Regnum Subversum, classified the mi as the instruments by which fallen spirits govern men. The author, Giacomo della Torre, reasoned that any structured system operating outside Christian doctrine must originate from exiled beings. This reasoning ignored the archaeological evidence, showing that the mi were essential components of Sumerian order long before later theological frameworks emerged. A broken cylinder seal found in Eridu depicts several symbols arranged in a circular pattern. Scholars believe the symbols represent specific mi. The accompanying inscription reads, "These are the measures set at the first." The seal likely served as an administrative stamp associated with festival preparation or temple storage. Its imagery suggests continuity rather than secrecy. The inscriptions show that the mi functioned as foundational measurements guiding early civilization. They organized work, ritual, and leadership. They appeared openly in lists, inventories, and instructions. Later reinterpretations framed them as hidden or forbidden knowledge, but the tablets record them as quiet constants of the world. These hidden measurements were not concealed from the people of Sumer. They were carved into clay, preserved in archives, and taught to scribes who carried their patterns forward, the city where words were stored. Across the low plains of southern Mesopotamia, two cities became known for something more enduring than walls or kings. Nippur and Eridu served as repositories of written memory, places where words were pressed into clay and stored in rooms built with deliberate quiet. Archaeologists who worked among their ruins in the late 19th and early 20th centuries noted that these cities preserved tablets describing divine order, agricultural planning, temple duties, and civic records side by side. The archives did not divide sacred from practical knowledge. Everything was stored together in shelves, baskets, and sealed rooms. This blending of categories later contributed to confusion, as later interpreters mistook administrative records for traces of forbidden law. The earliest archive room uncovered at Nippur was found in 1889 by John Henry Haynes. Excavators entered a collapsed wing of the Ekor temple complex and discovered hundreds of tablets, many shattered but still readable. Among them was a tablet labelled "No Problem, 103, which contained a calm line. Here the words are kept for the year. The phrase likely referred to lists of rituals, tax schedules, and decisions issued by the temple council. The scribe who wrote the line did not distinguish between divine and administrative content. Both categories belonged to the same structure, written in the same script, stored in the same room. Another tablet from this archive, "No Problem," 118, describes the storage procedure. They placed the words in the dry place. They sealed the door. Scholars believe the dry place was a small chamber built with baked brick rather than mud brick, designed to protect tablets from moisture. The sealing of the door followed a seasonal cycle, ensuring the security of records until they were needed for review. The tone of the inscription is steady, indicating that the act of storing knowledge carried the same importance as performing rituals. In Eridu, excavators uncovered a smaller archive beneath what remained of the Temple of Enki. A tablet catalogued as Eri 56 states, "The tablets of the deep house were brought for counting." The deep house referred to a lower chamber used for maintaining records related to water flow, measurements, and purification. Enki's association with the Abzu meant that his temple stored documents tied to the management of water systems. The phrase "brought for counting" suggests regular audits. The scribes treated these documents with the same care reserved for religious texts. Their approach reflected the Sumerian view that order, whether cosmic or civic, must be preserved through accurate record-keeping. In 1910, a discovery at Nippur revealed a group of tablets, arranged in a pattern that scholars interpreted as instructional. Among them, No Problem, 147 reads, "The student learns the signs of the Inanna and the signs of the fields." The pairing suggests that scribal education included divine names and agricultural records in equal measure. The Sumerians viewed these categories as intertwined. The divine governed the structure of life. The fields provided the means of living. Both required proper recording to maintain balance. Later interpretations did not maintain this unity. A 1699 Vatican manuscript titled De Libris Obscuris stated, "The writings of the first cities conceal teachings of the fallen ones." Its author, Father Niccolò Ferraris, believed that early archives stored forbidden knowledge. He based his claim on reports from travelers who carried fragmentary translations of Sumerian tablets. Ferraris assumed that any document describing divine beings must belong to a secret tradition. He did not consider that these tablets were kept alongside mundane records of grain storage and canal inspection. Archaeological findings offer a clearer perspective. A tablet from Eridu, Eri 61, describes the transfer of documents between archive rooms. They carried the tablets of the offerings with the tablets of the wells. The phrase indicates that rituals and water management were recorded together. The Sumerians did not separate the divine from the practical. Their worldview saw both as essential parts of the same order. This proximity later contributed to the belief that divine records were hidden among administrative details. One especially revealing discovery occurred in 2003 at Tel Uker. Excavators uncovered a small room containing 2 shelves of tablets. Many were broken, but one intact tablet, UQ28, included the line, "These words are the order of the city." Scholars believe the room served as a secondary archive for local officials. The tablets listed weights, measurements, festival dates, and repairs to canals. The phrase "order of the city" mirrors other inscriptions that describe divine order. This overlap suggests that the Sumerians saw no separation between cosmic and civic structure. Words preserved order, whether the order governed stars or taxes. A fragment from Lagash, Lag 49, contains a brief but important line. "They stored the names of the 7 with the names of the scribes." The tablet likely refers to a list of temple personnel and symbolic figures. Its presence in a single document demonstrates how easily later readers could misunderstand Sumerian archives. For the scribes, storing divine names alongside human names required no explanation. For later interpreters, this mixture suggested hidden teachings or forbidden associations. In 1977, scholar Piotr Steinkeller studied a group of Nippur tablets and noted the consistency with which scribes recorded divine and administrative matters together. He wrote, The archives reveal a world in which gods and cities shared the same written space. His analysis reinforced the view that Sumerian writing served as a tool for stabilizing all aspects of life. The archive rooms acted as the memory of the community, not as vaults of secret information. Yet the Vatican's reinterpretation continued. A manuscript from 1742, titled Custodia Tenebrarum, asserted that the first archives hid instructions from the fallen ones beneath innocent records. The manuscript offered no archaeological evidence. Instead, it relied on a belief that ancient cultures concealed dangerous knowledge within mundane lists. This belief persisted, shaping later ideas about Sumerian gods as exiled beings whose words were hidden among clay fragments. The Sumerian tablets tell a different story. They show scribes who worked daily to preserve order. They recorded measurements, rituals, names, and cycles with calm precision. Their archives held the patterns that shaped early civilization. Nothing in their tone suggests secrecy. Instead, they reflect continuity, a world where words anchored the structure of life. The cities where words were stored reveal how early people preserved the rhythm of their world. Through their archives, divine order and civic order stood side by side, pressed into the same clay and sealed behind the same doors. The river of signs, along the slow curves of the Euphrates and Tigris, writing moved the way, water did quietly, predictably, and with a gradual certainty that shaped the earliest cities. Archaeologists, studying the spreading patterns of early cuneiform, noted that tablets from Eridu, Uruk, Nippur, Shuruppak, and Kish share structural similarities that suggest a shared tradition of instruction. The river plains acted as a corridor for signs, carrying the shapes of wedges from one city to another. The earliest texts show this movement in their consistency. The same symbols for grain, water, offerings, and divine names appear across wide distances, written in steady, practiced lines. Later generations called this shared system a mystery, but the Sumerian tablets present it as a simple extension of communication, not a secret transmission of forbidden knowledge. The earliest artifact linking several cities is a tablet discovered in 1894 near Uruk, labelled Uru 12. It includes the line, "The signs travelled with the traders." Scholars interpret this as an observation about how writing spread through commerce. Traders who moved between cities required consistent marks to record exchanges. The tablet's tone is calm and factual. It shows that writing did not remain locked inside temple walls. It followed the same paths as boats and caravans, moving from market to market as cities exchanged goods. A second tablet, retrieved from Nippur in 1905 and catalogued as No Problem 22, lists several signs associated with measurement. The final line reads, "These signs are the same in Eridu." This direct comparison demonstrates that scribes recognized regional consistency. The phrase suggests an early awareness of a shared written system. The Sumerians did not treat this consistency as unusual. It reflected a need for clear communication across the river network. Later interpretations mistakenly assumed that such consistency implied the presence of a hidden authority guiding the cities. The tablets themselves point to practical necessity. In 1921, archaeologist Stephen Langdon excavated a set of tablets near Kish that contained instructional lines for new scribes. One tablet, KI 19, includes the phrase, "He learns the signs of the rivers." Scholars believe this referred to the marks used to denote canal routes, water rights, and flood levels. These signs were essential for managing irrigation systems shared by multiple cities. The movement of writing along the river plains paralleled the movement of water. Both shaped the rhythm of life in the early cities. The Vatican's interpretation followed a different path. A manuscript from 1713, titled De Flumine Tenebrarum, claims that the signs moved with the wandering hosts who fell from heaven. The author, Father Lorenzo Borgia, connected the widespread appearance of cuneiform signs with narratives about fallen angels teaching forbidden arts to humans. Borgia did not have access to archaeological material. He relied on early travelers' reports that described ancient inscriptions found across multiple ruins. The uniformity of the marks suggested to him an organized transmission of hidden knowledge. His interpretation contrasted sharply with the calm administrative context shown by the tablets. A tablet discovered in Lagash in 1919, LAG 55, records the distribution of grain and includes the line, "The signs were read in the House of Judgment." The House of Judgment was a room where disputes were settled. Writing allowed officials to review records and resolve conflicts. The use of signs in this context did not signify hidden teachings. It served the practical need for fairness in early civic life. The Sumerians used writing to stabilize agreements. Its spread across cities strengthened this stability. Another important find came from Shuruppak in 1998. Archaeologists uncovered a series of tablets used for teaching students the basic signs. One tablet, Shu 14, displays repeated wedges arranged in neat rows. The final line reads, "The signs flow like the river." This metaphor, simple and without symbolic weight, suggests that scribes recognize the movement of writing as continuous and inevitable. The phrase reflects the geography of their world. Rivers connected cities, and writing followed these connections. In 1964, scholar Adam Falkenstein studied tablets from several sites and concluded that the uniformity of early cuneiform resulted from a shared scribal tradition rather than an imposed order. He wrote, "The signs were stable because the needs of life were stable." Regions that shared similar agricultural cycles and trade routes required consistent record-keeping. Falkenstein's analysis aligns with the tone of the tablets, which present writing as a tool rather than a symbol of spiritual authority. A fragment discovered at Tel Uqair in 2007, labeled UQ 42, records a message sent from one city to another. The line reads, "The words went down the river." This suggests an early form of written communication across distances. The movement of clay tablets by boat allowed decisions, requests, and instructions to travel quickly between cities. The phrase is quiet and straightforward. It mirrors other inscriptions that describe the movement of goods along the same river routes. The Vatican manuscripts continue to reinterpret these movements through a different lens. A document from 1744, titled Custodia Rerum Vetustarum, states, "The writings of the first cities passed as whispers of the fallen ones." The author, Matteo Franchi, argued that the movement of writing across many cities reflected an ancient, hidden influence. Franci did not consider the archaeological evidence showing that the signs evolved in parallel with trade, irrigation, and civic administration. Another tablet from Nippur, No Problem 88, discovered in 1992, contains a line that reinforces the practical role of writing. They stored the signs for the people of the fields. This suggests that writing supported agricultural communities by preserving instructions, measurements, and schedules. The signs belonged to everyone who relied on the river systems, not to a select group guarding mysterious knowledge. A final tablet from catalogued as UR47, provides a simple statement: the signs tied the cities together. Scholars interpret this as a reflection on the unifying power of writing. Shared signs allowed cities to communicate, collaborate, and maintain order even across distances. Writing served as a quiet thread that connected the early world. The river of signs flowed steadily through the plains, linking communities with the same calm assurance as the rivers that shaped their fields. Later interpretations transformed this movement into a symbol of forbidden communication. But the tablets record a different story, one of practical continuity, where writing followed the paths of water and bound the cities of Sumer into a shared world, the halls where clay cooled. Across the cities of Sumer, the creation of a tablet followed a rhythm as steady as the flow of the rivers. The halls where clay cooled were quiet spaces built for work rather than mystery. Archaeologists studying the ruins of Eridu, Nippur, Uruk, and Lagash repeatedly noted that these rooms contained nothing unusual, no hidden chambers, no sealed vaults, no altars for forbidden rites. They held benches, clay bins, reed styluses, and shallow trays used for drying. Yet these simple rooms shaped the memory of the ancient world. Every line about the Inanna, the Igigi, the Seven, and the patterns of the Me passed through these spaces before entering the archives. Later traditions mistook these halls for secret repositories, but the tablets themselves present them as places where scribes worked with calm attention, recording the structure of life in the earliest cities. The process began with the gathering of clay. Excavators found traces of clay pits near both Ur and Nippur, showing that scribes preferred fine river mud mixed with a small amount of sand. A tablet from Nippur, dated to around 2550 BCE, labelled "No Problem, 214, includes the line, "They brought clay from the bend of the river." The phrase appears in an instructional text used for training new scribes. It indicates that clay sources were recognized and recorded as part of the workspace. The line has no trace of symbolism. It shows that the scribes treated their materials with the same practicality found throughout their work. Another tablet from Uruk, catalogued as Uru 58, describes the preparation of clay. They shaped the clay with water. They set it in the shade. Archaeologists discovered several rooms lined with plaster and containing shallow depressions. These depressions likely held clay that needed to rest before being shaped. The Sumerians understood that clay became easier to inscribe after it settled. The inscription reflects this awareness with calm precision. There is no suggestion of ritual or secrecy. It is simply a record of technique. In 1914, an excavation at Eridu uncovered a drying hall attached to the temple complex. Inside, researchers found hundreds of tablets in various stages of completion, some still soft, some hardened, some broken, and some carefully stacked along the walls. A fragment from this room, designated ERI 92, includes the line, "They placed the words in the cool room until the day was full." This line refers to the slow drying process. Tablets needed to remain in a shaded area so that the clay hardened evenly. The phrase "the day was full" likely meant that the tablets were checked at the end of the working day. The tone matches other administrative instructions found throughout Sumer. In Lagash, a discovery made in 1928 revealed a series of benches with straight edges suitable for leveling clay. The tablets found near these benches contained practice inscriptions used by students. One practice tablet, LAG 78, displays repeated signs for grain, water, stars, and divine names. The last line on the tablet reads, "They cooled them for the learning." Scholars believe this phrase indicates that the tablets were reused after drying. Students often practiced on hardened clay by pressing signs lightly, using the surface as a guide. Nothing in the room suggested that these halls held forbidden knowledge. There were classrooms, preserved by accident when the buildings collapsed. Another important inscription came from Kish in 1932. A tablet labelled KI 44 describes the way scribes passed work along a chain of tasks. The first shaped the clay. The second pressed the signs. The third dried the tablet. The fourth carried it to the house of words. This sequence shows that tablet production involved multiple individuals. Each step left its mark on the surface. The process reveals that the scribes viewed their labor as communal, stable, and integrated into the rhythm of daily life. Later interpretations imagined these rooms as isolated chambers for secret writing. The tablets show a different reality workshops filled with the movements of several people. The Vatican's interpretation of these halls diverged widely from this archaeological record. A manuscript from 1709 titled De Figulis Antiquis argues that these clay rooms were vaults where the fallen ones whispered teachings into the hands of men. The author, Father Domenico Anselmi, assumed that the quiet nature of the spaces indicated secrecy. He believed that the preservation of ancient names across distant cities suggested the influence of hidden beings. He did not consider that the consistency came from scribal training and the shared needs of urban life. His conclusion shaped later frameworks that treated Sumerian knowledge as forbidden. A tablet found in Nippur in 2002, no problem, 301, provides a clearer view of the scribe's perspective. It reads, "The clay waits, but the signs must be firm." This simple line refers to the need for consistency. Scribes repeated signs thousands of times across generations. Their focus on firmness ensured that the names, measurements, and instructions recorded in the tablets carried the same meaning across time. This continuity later appeared mysterious to outside observers, but to the scribes it was a matter of maintaining order. In 1975, archaeologist Elizabeth Stone studied the layout of tablet workshops in several cities. She noted that these rooms were often placed near entrances to temples or administrative centers. This proximity allowed completed tablets to move quickly from the drying halls to the archives. Her analysis reflects the functional nature of the work. The location of the halls reinforced efficiency, not secrecy. A small fragment from Shurapak, SHU 67, offers a quiet detail. They turned the tablets so the air touched both sides. The line appears in a text used for student instruction. It shows that the scribes recorded even simple techniques. Such instructions reveal a world where knowledge was not hidden, but taught openly to those training in the scribal tradition. The Vatican's manuscripts often misinterpreted these same details. A document from 1725, titled Tenebrae Scripturae, claimed that the drying and turning of tablets symbolized the turning of hearts away from the highest order. The writer believed that physical manipulation of clay indicated a metaphorical transformation. His symbolic reading ignored the plain technical purpose recorded in the tablets. Another key discovery came in 1996 at Tel Uqair. Archaeologists uncovered a sealed pit containing dozens of discarded tablets. Many were early drafts or practice pieces. One tablet, UQ90, bore the inscription, "The first signs broke." This fragment likely refers to a beginner's attempt at writing. The scribes discarded broken attempts but kept the lessons. Modern scholars see these pits as evidence of a learning environment. Later interpreters viewed them as hidden repositories of rejected teachings. A tablet from Eridu, Eri 102, discovered in 2012, includes a final calm instruction: leave the clay in silence. Scholars believe this referred to the final stage of drying, when tablets were left undisturbed to harden completely. The quiet of these rooms was necessary for the process, not for secrecy. Silence preserved the shape of the signs. Comparing archaeological evidence with later interpretations reveals two separate narratives. The Sumerian tablets show halls filled with routine labor. The Vatican manuscripts transformed these same halls into imagined vaults of forbidden knowledge. One tradition recorded measured procedures, the other projected theological symbolism onto clay surfaces. The distance between them widened across centuries, shaped by different views of what knowledge meant. The halls where clay cooled continue to preserve the memory of early writing. Their benches, trays, and walls, once held the first attempts to record the structure of the world. The scribes who worked there pressed lines into soft clay, letting the signs harden until they could enter the archives where words endured. In these quiet rooms, the earliest stories of gods, cities, fields, and time took shape not through secrecy, but through steady hands and cooling clay. As we step back from the tablets, the seals, and the quiet halls where clay once cooled, a clearer picture begins to form. The Sumerians recorded their world with calm precision, leaving behind lines that carried no drama, no hidden warnings, only structure. Yet over centuries, layers of interpretation turned those orderly records into symbols of rebellion, secrecy, and fallen beings. In this documentary, we trace those shifts through archaeological evidence and later manuscripts, watching how meaning can move, change, and reshape itself across time. If you found this journey through forgotten archives and misunderstood histories compelling, consider joining us for future explorations. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every discussion helps uncover more of the quiet stories left behind in history's oldest script stories that wait in clay, steady and patient, for someone willing to read them with care.